Good morning, Dawg Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. 10 years of doing this show, just as much fun today as it was when we first started. And, I mean, I guess we're only a few days, so the DawgNation official 10th anniversary has happened. We're only a couple of days away from what would be the sort of official DawgNation Daily 10th anniversary. We won't do anything to mark that or anything. It's just kind of an interesting, I think, footnote for me. 10 great years. We've had a great time. And listen, we don't never know. You never know in life how much longer you have or whatever. We try to live open-handed. So we're thankful for the 10 years we've gotten, and we'll see after that. But what a great experience. And so thrilled to be able to do this with you today. Fun stuff on tap. We have a special guest today that I don't believe we've ever had on the show before. You'll know him as the former Georgia assistant coach, Alabama strength coach, Scott Cochran. You may have seen Coach Cochran making the rounds a bit lately. He has a brand new book that's out. And on today's show, we'll talk a little bit about what it's like behind the scenes with Kirby Smart, what he learned from Nick Saban. But most importantly, the very personal story that Coach Cochran tells about his battle with addiction and kind of what he has done to overcome that and be in a much better place in his life now than after some scary circumstances a few years ago. I think this is a very real discussion. Hopefully it'll be meaningful to many of you. It was certainly for me. I will tell you that we have recorded this prior to this. Several days ago we recorded this, so was saving it for today just simply because they asked us to, because that's when the book is coming out. So that is what we're going to do on today's show, that plus Davin Bellamy. And off the top, to talk some football on the field for these Georgia Bulldogs, there is a position group that's been under a lot of scrutiny. Big microscope on them because it's where Georgia needs improvement. Did we get yesterday, perhaps, a subtle message from Kirby Smart about what he wants to see from this group here this year and what it's going to take to be kind of in the mix and getting as much playing time as you want to? We might have, and I'll let you decide for yourself here coming up. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Breda Pest Management. They handle bugs and critters.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I've been telling you over the course of the last couple of days, I feel like there are a couple of unresolved issues for Georgia where, as you watch things sort of play out in fall camp and listen to people who go to the practices and talk to some of the very moneyed boosters who are lucky enough to sort of see behind the scenes, or others that might have access to some of that kind of stuff, it seems like that some of the questions that Georgia sought answers to during this preseason time have been answered somewhat emphatically. It seems like there's been really good things happening, for instance, with the wide receiver position, we're led to believe. We already know that Georgia's got among the deepest tight end position groups that anybody could have, inside linebacker much the same way. I get the impression that Georgia probably feels pretty good about its secondary. There's battle for playing time going on there, but you get the impression that Georgia feels pretty good about that. We'll talk more about Gunner Stockton here in a moment, but it's pretty obvious that Georgia is quite settled with Stockton, whether it names him as the starting quarterback or not. So some of the issues that Georgia is facing are on their way to being resolved, it seems like, in a positive way. There are a couple that seem to linger, though. There are a couple of these sort of unanswered questions that don't seem obviously answered as of yet, or don't even seem like we really even know kind of where it's going. And one of those, I would say, involves the running back position for UGA. You can make a case that running back might be among the most scrutinized positions for Georgia in every year and in this specific season. In every year, because this is a program that likes to sort of think of itself as RBU, Running Back University. The history of the program obviously helps explain why that is. We think the great lineage, starting with Herschel Walker and continuing even to this day with, in contemporary times, the likes of Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, etc. Of course, Georgia's status as RBU is well established. And in this particular year, Georgia is coming off a season in 2024 where it wasn't exactly RBU-like. It's weird to think of Georgia being among the worst in the country in any category, just given the overall talent that exists with the program. it's especially weird to be so deficient in an area that for all of our lifetimes, no matter how old you happen to be, Georgia has been kind of dominant with the running game. But boy, last year kind of outside the top 100 when it comes to key rushing categories. And it has been stated over and over again that for Georgia, this has been stated by Kirby Smart, other Georgia coaches, that for Georgia to be as good as it wants to be this season, it has got to be better with the rushing attack. It's just got to run the ball more effectively to sustain longer drives, to create more scoring opportunities, just to make life a little bit easier. You got to be better with the running game overall. And a lot of our discussion, of course, the last few days has been, well, exactly how do you get there? And this is where we really try not to be a cliched show. Probably fall into that trap because cliches are kind of an easy trap to fall into. But when you think about the running back position, there is sort of an obvious cliche that goes along with running back. Doing high school football, and it's interesting when you do a high school football game, and many of you watch me on TV when I do those, and I certainly appreciate that. When you get two new teams for a new game, you have to learn about these teams. And it's easy to kind of want to put what you're learning into some sort of previously established template that exists in your mind. For instance, for the running game, the duo, the tandem of running backs that play the most, you sort of think of one guy as the sort of thunder and one guy as the sort of lightning. And throughout history, it sort of seems like one guy sort of exists as more of like the bruising thunder style guy, and the other guy's a little quicker, a little more elusive. He may be a little faster, and that's the sort of lightning. One big kind of in between the tackles runner, one guy kind of using the outside, kind of creating longer runs, more explosive runs. That is the template sometimes that people sort of understand the running back position with. And admittedly, while we try not to kind of fall into the trap of cliches, when we have thought about Georgia's attempt to upgrade its rushing attack for this season, sometimes we probably do think about it in those terms of, okay, well, you've got a couple of candidates who could be your explosive, elusive runner that could kind of get the longer, more dynamic runs, but you better be able to have the bruising tailback, the bigger guy, maybe the stronger guy, who can get the sort of hard yards between the tackles. That was one of those things in particular that we don't know that Georgia had nearly enough of last year, and a lot of that was due to injury. So it is with that in mind that I thought that Kirby Smart was asked an interesting question yesterday. Now, this comes from our colleague Connor Riley, and to me, this is sort of what I want from a press conference. I think it's a very straightforward question. It kind of gives plenty of room for Kirby Smart to answer it however he wants to. Kirby, a little ornery or whatever else, but that's just to be expected as you get close to the start of the season. A little bit of a vibe shift when it comes to Kirby Smart. You can sort of set your watch to that in a typical year. But this, to me, is what a press conference should be. Direct question, allowing space for Smart to answer. And in answering the question, I think that Kirby Smart sort of gives you something interesting. So let me set it up for you, and I'll let you hear it yourself. Connor asks Kirby about the role of what I just kind of described as the sort of thunder style running back, the big bruising style, how much that big back is really necessary for Georgia here right now. And this is where Smart says something that I think we're going to allow ourselves to interpret here a bit. Let me let you hear it first, then we'll talk about it. Kirby with Connor from yesterday.
With guys like Josh McCray and Roderick Robinson and the size physically that they bring to the running attack, how important is that physical element and having sort of a bruiser-type running back important to what you guys want to do in the rushing game this year?
Yeah, running back's a running back. I don't, you guys' job is to say the size of the back. Derrick Henry's a big back. He's big, but he bounces out a lot and outruns people to the edge. And that's the way he was when he played. I've seen really small guys like Dejan get inside really hard yards and be 190 pounds. I don't try to put guys in categories. Let them be who they are. If you're going to be a big back and not be super elusive, then you better be physical and run that way. But the identity of the back is based on the back. And I don't think that proves itself out except for in scrimmages and games when things are tackled.
So let me tell you why I think that's a pretty interesting answer on the part of Kirby Smart. As I said before, the old cliche is who's your thunder running back and who's your lightning running back. Thunder between the tackles, lightning on the outside edge. Lightning gets the explosive runs. Thunder gets the 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Theoretically, in the sort of cliched mindset that I just described, you kind of need both. But what Kirby Smart just told you there in so many words is, hey, if you're the big back and that's sort of all you are, I don't know. Kirby, it sort of sounds like he's saying, we want our running backs to be able to do both. This idea that you're going to come in and be the sort of big bruiser, the sort of big back that kind of jams it in between the tackles, hard yards in the middle part of the field, that alone might not be enough to get you on the field for Georgia here this fall. And I think you pair that with what I believe at this point is a fairly well-founded rumor. Not every rumor that kind of makes its way from the practice field to our ears is as substantiated as others, but a couple of weeks worth of seeing a little bit of Dwight Phillips. I think that starts to feel like one of those things that sort of feels like it's true. And what Kirby Smart's saying there in so many words is, hey, if you're the so-called, to use Connor's phrase, big back, but you're not breaking tackles, you're not elusive, you're not making people miss, you're not getting extra yards, I don't know how much room there is for you at Georgia here right now. Georgia, I think, on the basis of what Kirby Smart is kind of saying there, admittedly we're reading between the lines, but what Smart is kind of saying there is we want more than just big bruising tailbacks. We want more than just 3 yards and a cloud of dust. We want running backs that can make people miss, that can get extra yards. In the analytics world, when they're trying to measure a rushing play and what credit goes to, like, say, the offensive line compared to the running backs, the general thought is in the first 5 yards of a rushing play, almost all of that success belongs to the offensive line. It's kind of beyond 5 yards that a portion of that kind of belongs to the running back, the analytics community's long believed. And then once you're breaking, like, say, a 10-yard run or more, broadly speaking, well, now that is to the credit of the running back. And in a roundabout way, I think this is what Smart's also kind of alluding to here, which is, hey, we want the running back that gets the extra yards because of what he's able to do as a running back and just being the big bruiser. For us right now, for what we want, Smart seems to be saying that might not quite be enough. But then there's the opposite side of the same coin. So let's say you're the sort of running back and, well, I've got the elusiveness. I've got the ability to kind of bounce it outside. I've got the ability to kind of potentially make the highlight play. I've got the opportunity to do that. But you pair what Kirby Smart just said right there of, hey, it's not enough just to be a bruiser, not enough just to be a big back. We've seen smaller backs like Dejon Edwards have success in the middle. It's also kind of not enough just to be the sort of exciting lightning style highlight back either. That you better be able to also get the tough stuff in the middle if you want to be able to play. What Smart said there pairs with something that Smart's top lieutenant, Mike Bobo, said when he met with the media the other day, that they're kind of looking for those running backs who, like, think about a Nate Frazier from high school or something like that. Guys who want to make the highlight play. Hey, are you also willing to kind of go into the middle of the field where the nasty business gets done? And are you also willing to thrive right there? What Smart just said, going along with what Mike Bobo said a couple of weeks ago, let me give this to you as a reminder.
Running back, not as complex as some of the other positions except for pass protection, but this guy dove in. He worked extremely hard. Early in the year, it was, we're trying to get him on the field and get him some touches and didn't put him in a lot of situations that would involve pass protection. By the end of the year, we weren't afraid to, to have him in there on third down. So I think he's growing as a complete back. I think his next step is, stop trying to look for the home run all the time. That's something we got to get better with all the backs, is that we got to learn to get the dirty yards, and every play's not going to be a home run. A lot of these backs, in high school, they're the best player on the field, and they can bounce anything and turn an average play into an explosive play by bouncing it out running. This league's different, and, working on his steps, working on his vision, and keying the right defender up front and pressing the hole and hitting. And that's something I think in the first 6 practices you've seen an improvement of Nate being willing to stick it in there and get the dirty yards.
I love that phrase, dirty yards, and Bobo uses it twice. And obviously he's kind of in reference to Nate Frazier there, who he says, and if you watch high school football, you see this. And I saw this last week, the Corky Hill Dave Hunter Classic. A good high school running back essentially can't be tackled. It's really amazing sometimes just how much of a weapon that is. Even in like 2025, when like the game is so advanced and things like that, a good high school running back is still essentially unstoppable. And so as a good high school running back, you probably develop some bad habits. You're so used to kind of running past people, running away from people, that you sort of forget, at the college level, it's not going to be all just highlights. There are going to be some moments when I got to get some dirty yards in between the tackles, and I've got to be able to do that. And that's what Mike Bobo says he wants there. So let's pair these two thoughts together as a way of wrapping all this up. Kirby Smart asked specifically about big backs. He says, being a big back alone is not enough. If all you are is the big bruiser, and you can't make people miss, you can't give me anything extra on the outside, you have no chance of producing the explosive run, I would take that to mean you're probably not going to play. I would. I think there's a subtle message being delivered there from Kirby Smart. Well, if all you are is the potential for 3 yards in a cloud of dust, that's not a successful running play, and therefore you might not get as much playing time as you want to get. I think we should take Smart's words very seriously there. I think the Georgia running back should take Smart's words there very seriously. But it's not just that. Mike Bobo is also the opposite side of the same coin of, hey, if you feel like you're the highlight reel, if you think you're Barry Sanders or something along those lines, but you can't give me dirty yards in the middle, you might not get to play as much as you want to. What Georgia's looking for right now, it certainly sounds like on the basis of what now multiple coaches, Kirby and Bobo, have said, is they want running backs that can get the dirty yards up the middle, no matter how big you happen to be, but also have some chance to make you miss, and some chance to turn a normal gain into an extra gain as a way of compiling some sort of easy rushing yards over the course of the season. Now, the good news is there is a long list of running backs vying to be the trusted backs that get the chance to get the touches and the playing time and everything that goes with that. But the honest truth is there is not room for everybody. So who is going to emerge? Who is going to step to the forefront? We have our guesses as to at least a couple of those. For instance, Nate Frazier, I think, is well set up for that. We believe that there's enough buzz around Bo Walker that he's probably going to play. Given the fact that Georgia wants the elusiveness we're led to believe, I think that Dwight Phillips, probably to the surprise of some, is maybe going to be in the mix on all this too. There's room for more. Who is it? Who else? Who else gets that chance to be what Georgia needs from the running game? It's open for business. Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo, Josh Crawford, they are looking for options right now, but they want you to be both. They want you to be thunder and lightning, at least have the potential to be that way. And that's the recipe that Georgia's hoping to lean on as it looks to improve its rushing attack here this season. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. We are happy that you're with us, no matter how you get to us, live on video, 10 a.m., on demand after that, radio, Athens Sports Radio 960, the Rev podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. What a thrill it is to have you here today. So thankful to have you. Special guest for us, by the way, coming up in a couple of minutes. I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. Let me also give a thanks to our friends at Breda Pest Management who make this all possible here today. Obviously, Breda has been doing a great job taking care of our audience for a very long time. Here's something else I'm very proud of when it comes to Breda Pest Management. I love high school football. I love being a part of our broadcast each and every Friday on this year Atlanta News First, Channel 46. One of my favorite things about high school football is the way in which the sport is so entrenched in our local communities. You never feel more a part of the fabric of your society, more so when you're involved in high school football. And I do believe, honestly, if I had to guess, that's one of the reasons why Matt Brady and his entire team there at Breda Pest Management are so deep into the high school football scene, because it's families and communities, and it's all coming together to sort of support their local students, and that's what it's all about. And guess what? That same level of support that Breda provides to high school athletics, it provides to you too when it comes to something really important. Your home, not only is it the source of your greatest memories and your deepest emotional connection, it's also perhaps your most important asset. It's certainly your biggest financial investment. Therefore, you got to take care of it, and there is nothing that'll destroy it any faster than these termites. In Georgia, you got to have termite protection. You probably already have it. But the fact of the matter is, you may not be happy with the company that's providing it. Year after year, the quality of service they're offering just keeps going down while the cost of that service is going up. With our friends at Breda Pest Management, that is not going to be the situation. When you make the switch to Breda Pest Management today, they're going to put more money back in your pocket just for making that decision. That's what Breda Pest Management is all about. So find them online, bredapest.com, BREDA, bredapest.com. They've been in business since 1975. They've got 125 employees. This is a multi-generational company that has been taking care and serving folks well for a very long time. And it's time that you made the switch and put more money back in your pocket for doing so, and have the peace of mind of knowing you're working with good folks. Matt's a huge dog fan, big local sports fan, huge supporter of high school sports here locally too. It's a great reason for you to connect with Breda Pest Management today online, bredapest.com, BREDA, bredapest.com for more on that. All right, a couple of notes here real quick. First of all, there's this. In a couple of minutes, we're going to have a very special guest on today's show. Full disclosure, I have pre-recorded this interview several days ago. We were asked to run it here this week in celebration of a brand new book that is now on bookshelves at wherever you buy your books. Former Georgia assistant coach Scott Cochran, who also was a part of the tremendous success that Alabama had as its longtime strength and conditioning coach, and a guy, and I've heard this from former Alabama players, beloved during that era of Alabama football, a guy that players universally thought was sort of for them. Cochran was a very, very popular guy. He has obviously seen the inside, the inner workings of great programs and great men leading those programs. Nick Saban at Alabama, Kirby Smart at Georgia. Coach Cochran today is going to talk to us about that. In addition to that, Coach Cochran tells a very personal story about his own battle with addiction and the scary circumstances that led him to believe, I need help, and the brave steps he took to get the help that he needed. I believe this can be an inspiring story today. It's about football to a certain extent, but it's also about some deeper, more real life type stuff too. And every now and then on this show, I think it's important we leave some space for that. Today we will. I believe you're going to really like Scott Cochran on the show here coming up in just a moment. Also, before we move on, let me remind you that we did a whole lot yesterday on the big upcoming game for Georgia against Tennessee. Don't forget, DawgNation Invasion is going to be a huge part of that. If it's a big game for the Dogs, DawgNation needs to be at its best. DawgNation Invasion, our way of doing that, classic paddle wheel style riverboat up and down the Tennessee River. Unbelievable tailgate experience on the boat. That means the buffet, that means the bar, the drink tickets that go with that. All of that included in your price, of course. DawgNation shows, DawgNation personalities hanging out, some of the best Georgia fans you'll ever tailgate with. This is going to be an awesome experience. You are going to love it. So please check out DawgNation.com/tailgate to secure your ticket. That's DawgNation.com/tailgate. And if you're one of the first 125 to sign up, which I believe we still have some space for, if you're one of the first 125 to sign up, you'll also get yourself one of these DawgNation Invasion t-shirts. Really fun design for that. Can't wait to see you for the DawgNation Invasion on the Tennessee River, on the riverboat, up and down the river for a couple of hours. Great buffet, awesome bar, a lot of fun people, great pregame experience before one of the biggest games of the year for Georgia. So DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. That is DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. All right, before we talk to Coach Cochran, let's get ready to go around the doghouse here today, presented by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. And we just played a clip a moment ago exchange with Kirby and Connor where, Connor says, hey, how important are big running backs to you? And Kirby's like, well, you guys just want to do this. There's a lot of sometimes, especially you get close to the season, a lot of you guys in the media want to ... There was another example of that with Kirby Smart yesterday as it relates to whether or not Georgia would name a starting quarterback. Several programs have made sort of a big to-do. Notre Dame just did that with C.J. Carr. Ohio State just did that with Julian Sayin. Alabama did this whole coronation for Ty Simpson. Kirby Smart was given the chance yesterday to do the same thing with the guy that we obviously know and have known now for months is starting for Georgia, Gunner Stockton. Smart, though, decided he didn't want to do that. This is Kirby from yesterday.
Are you prepared to name him the starter for whatever that means? And,
Yeah, so y'all can write about it? No, no.
What I really want to ask, Coach, is what do you expect to see from him this year at quarterback now that camp has
Good decisions. Good decisions. Make good decisions. Continue to develop. Understanding situational football. We've made football so complicated. Some quarterbacks, I don't think they know the down and distance. Like, I don't think they actually know, do I have another down after this play, or is this my last chance to get the first down? It's just little things. Being a quarterback, understanding the game, understanding what the defense is doing. He's grown so much in regards to that. ID and protections, ID and run game. Playing quarterback is, it's like being a computer. It's got a million things going on at once, and he's gotten better and better at handling those things, and that's what I want to see him do when he gets the opportunity.
So to be clear, this whole thing to me is, I don't know, I don't think it's a big deal for Kirby to name Gunner Stockton the starter. Kirby typically hasn't done that very much. I also don't think it's a big deal to not name him either. Like, Smart seems to be wanting to go out of his way not to name Gunner Stockton as the quarterback. I don't know that there's a ton of value in that necessarily either, just being honest. If anything, I think the point that Smart's probably trying to make there, and to a degree I do believe this is true, is that we don't necessarily need to make Gunner Stockton into a bigger topic of conversation than he already is. And on that point, I totally agree. We've said this over and over again, that if this fall, starting next Saturday and continuing for the months after that, if on a Monday morning on our show, if the thing we're talking the most about on these given weeks is Gunner Stockton, then with all due respect, something's probably not quite gone the way that it's supposed to for Georgia. At the very best of Georgia in 2021 and 2022, for as heroic as Stetson Bennett was in some of the biggest moments that's in those seasons, the truth is that Bennett was always just one of the things that Georgia had going on. And we believe for this upcoming year, once again, Gunner Stockton needs to be one of the good things that Georgia has, but not the main focal point of the conversation. So if that's Smart's reason for not wanting to name him as the starter, even though it's obvious that he's going to be, and it has always been obvious that he was going to be, then I guess there is some reason to justify that there. For instance, yesterday, the coaches' preseason All-SEC team came out. You see on the first team guys like KJ Bolden and Christian Miller. You see guys like Ernest Green and Nate Frazier mentioned. CJ Allen gets the mention here. He's also a first-team guy. When you look at the Georgia players getting preseason All-SEC consideration, even though Oscar Delp is on that list too, even though they play a position that theoretically is less important than quarterback, in terms of the overall value for Georgia here this year, we would say that all those players are potentially as valuable as Stockton can be. You need a great offensive line. You need a great defense. You need weapons to throw to. All of that sort of equals what Georgia is at its best, the sort of ensemble kind of group that Georgia had when it was winning national championships. And Gunner Stockton is not going to stand, or at least shouldn't stand, at the forefront well ahead of all of that, because Georgia at its best, that's not what Georgia has been. But that doesn't mean that we don't think that Stockton himself, whether named as the starter or not, isn't potentially set up for success this season. Late in yesterday's show, had a chance to ask for like the millionth time, but this may be the final time before the actual game started getting played. Jake Fromm, who sort of knows what it feels like to be the Georgia starting quarterback. By the way, he was named as starter in 2019, never named, though, in 2017 or 2018. In fact, he came off the bench to become starter in 2017. So Fromm kind of knows what all this sort of quarterback drama kind of feels like. He lived through it. He obviously knows Gunner Stockton really well, too. I asked him yesterday, Jake, how good do you actually think Gunner Stockton is going to be? This is what Jake said.
Yeah, I think Gunner's ready. I think he is really owning his role. Everything I'm hearing, everything I'm seeing. I mean, honestly, as a fan of Gunner, of him as a person, friends with Gunner, know his family really well. Man, I, as a fan, am just so excited for him and this football season, this opportunity that he has in front of him. He knows the standard that is there to be a quarterback at the University of Georgia. There's going to be high expectations for him, but I think he's in a spot where he can really handle it. He's got a great group around him, got a great team around him, a revamped wide receiver room, an offensive line that is just striked and poised to be ready to be able to do both, throw the ball and run the ball. So I think the philosophy there is there from Coach Bobo. I just think all the stars are lining up, and I'm not saying there won't be some learning curves early, or some hiccups or, a few bumps in the road. But I think Gunner is poised to be a high caliber starter here in the SEC.
Poised to be a high caliber starter in the SEC. That's what Jake Fromm says. He also begins the answer by saying, I think that Gunner Stockton's ready. And that, to me, succinct as it is almost the most interesting statement. And I do believe, if I had to guess, that's what Kirby Smart thinks too. Naming as the starter, no, he don't want to do that. That just gives the media more to write about. So says Kirby. But whether he's named as the starter or not, the other things that Kirby has said about Gunner, including just yesterday, I think give you a pretty strong indication that Kirby believes that Gunner is ready. If that's what Kirby Smart thinks, then my guess is that's what Georgia fans should think too. And that is Around the Doghouse. And it's presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. Of course, one of the great things about Gunner Stockton is he's a homegrown guy. He right here in the great state of Georgia, Rabun County High School. He knows what it's like to kind of grow up on Georgia soil and now representing the university that represents his state. What a proud moment that must be for Gunner Stockton as he begins his first full season as a starting quarterback. And by the way, speaking of the great state of Georgia and representing it well, that's what our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau are all about too. They've, for a long time, kind of taken care of Georgia. I'm talking about the farmers that live here in this great state, putting food on the table for folks all around the world is something the great state of Georgia takes very, very seriously and is very proud of. And Georgia Farm Bureau serves those folks. But they also want to serve you, too, for your insurance needs. Think about auto insurance, you have to have it. Home insurance, you need that, too. Life insurance and the sort of financial services products that are kind of in that space, Georgia Farm Bureau can help you out with that as well. So I want you to reach out to them today and find out why Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. Friendly folks that are there for you in your time of need. Who could ask for much more than that? You can give them a call. 877-404-1050. That's 877-404-1050 or online, gfbinsurance.com. One more time, that is gfbinsurance.com. Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team and a great part of Around the Doghouse here today. All right, before we're done, it's our buddy Davin Bellamy. Can't wait for that discussion. One of Georgia's rivals has done something that most people think is pretty embarrassing, so we'll have a laugh at them at their expense about that here today. But for now, special interview, incredible story, inspiring, I think, to many. The former Georgia assistant coach, a longtime bedrock member of the original Nick Saban era at Alabama. It is Scott Cochran today in honor of his new book that is on bookshelves everywhere. Scott Cochran here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. And here on DawgNation Daily, happened to welcome in a guy that's been a big part of SEC football for a long time and also someone with a tremendous story to tell and a new book to help tell it. It is Coach Scott Cochran, formerly of Georgia, Alabama, and of course now at West Alabama, here today on DawgNation Daily. Coach, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us.
Fired up to be here, baby. Glad to be here.
Well, we're excited about the brand new book. We're calling it Skull Session, Mastering the Mental Game in Sports and in Work and in Life. And we're obviously going to talk about that and how folks can kind of pick that up here over the course of our time. But to kind of, I guess, get people acquainted with you, there's so much to talk about. let's kind of go back to a time in which you sort of first became well known to a lot of us when you get there to Alabama. Of course, Kirby Smart's there too, and Nick Saban starts having this incredible success there. And as someone like yourself, books are written all the time about, success formulas and, how to kind of translate that to business. And here you are, not just having kind of a front row seat for all this, but really being an instrumental part of how Alabama built this sort of unprecedented national championship machine for a while. What did you learn about success, your own personal success, the institutional program success, being so close to Coach Saban, and all the ways in which that just seemed to kind of fall in place shortly after he was hired there in 2007?
I got a glimpse of it at LSU. Working with him for 5 years at LSU, I had a glimpse. I had a little bit of, okay, I understand what it takes to be a champion and to work for a man that knows how to win championships. And so when I got to Alabama, it was a perfect fit for me. I'm from New Orleans. I went to a school called John Curtis, and I lost 2 games in high school as a player. So I know a lot about championships, so working for Coach Saban was just, 2007, he gives me the call. And for obvious reasons now, it's a no-brainer that I sprinted to Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And then obviously you're there. And one of the things we've had former Alabama players tell us, and, seems just sort of obvious looking in, is that, and I think Lane Kiffin even said this one time, you're kind of like the good cop and Coach Saban's sort of the bad cop. And former Alabama players have told us, like, hey, during the offseason, Coach Cochran was sort of my guy. And that was the guy we felt comfortable talking to and maybe, just sort of interacting with. Whereas, like, as the leader of the organization, Saban had this entirely different vibe going on. So being, I guess, the sort of trusted resource for the players, that had to be kind of a special relationship for you too. And it's kind of the template for how we think of all strength coaches now, but it was really you in that role that probably kind of made that famous. That had to be a good feeling to know at that time. And for many years after that, you would have such a deep relationship with all the players that would come through there.
Yeah. And I thrived in that. I thrived in helping others. It's kind of being a coach is a bit of a calling, I would say, especially, when we first started doing this, the players were brand new to things. Like, think of the NIL now, right? Like, it's brand new. A freshman walks in the door, and you got to think about it, right? If you're at Alabama or Georgia or LSU, you're coming in as a superstar, right? You were a really good player for your high school. You probably never watched, right? You're probably never on the sideline because somebody was in front of you. And you come in as a freshman and you're bigger, you're faster, you're sleeping better than you've ever slept. You have all of these things and you're not touching the field. So that's where my relationship with them really grew when they were freshmen, when guys were freshmen, because, they're, mom and dad are telling them, oh, you should be starting, you should be the guy, you're my baby. And then they come to practice every day and there's a first round talent in front of you. You can pout or you can, put all 10 toes down and say, I'm going to learn everything I can from the guy in front of me. I'm going to try to beat him out, but I'm going to learn as much as I possibly can so that I can be an All-American one day, an All-SEC player, or get my name called in the draft.
The book is Skull Session, Mastering the Mental Game in Sports, Work, and Life. The author is Scott Cochran, former Georgia coach, Alabama coach, joining us here today on DawgNation Daily. We're talking about all the big details. And, of course, it's around this time that you also develop a friendship with Kirby Smart. It's interesting for those of us who talk about Georgia on a daily basis to think about this version of Kirby when he was much younger, when we didn't know that he would also go on to have the success he's also enjoyed. What was it like seeing Kirby in those early days, and what did you think about him before he became as famous as he's become to all of us now?
Oh, it was obvious that he had the what is it, the it factor. It was when he was the defensive coordinator, his attention to details uh were incredible. I always say Coach Saban's attention to details is where, that's where the championships are won, in his detailed work. But Kirby took it to another level. And so, anyone in the program that was around Coach Smart when he was, younger, grinding, they knew that he was going to have success as a head coach, no doubt. And I think that's why everybody tried to get on the plane when he left Tuscaloosa, because they know he was going to have success.
So it's around this time as you're having your own brand of success as probably the most famous strength and conditioning coordinator in college football, truly respected as an instrumental part of the success that Alabama is having. And yet, as you've been very open in talking about, you were battling a lot of personal stuff throughout all of this. And the way I get the sense of this, and Coach Cochran, I want you to tell your own story, of course, is, but your coach, you've got to be the loudest guy at practice. You've got to be the most energetic guy. You're literally not allowed to have a bad day, right? You can't be lethargic. You can't be tired. And in the midst of trying to keep up with what people were expecting from you, that came at a personal cost during that time in your life. Would you mind talking about what became for you a battle with addiction, painkilling pills specifically during that time? Would you mind telling us a little bit more about that?
Yes, yes. And I go deep into it in the book, and it's kind of how the book was originally. That was the whole point, was to tell my story. And I started getting these migraines from yelling, and I went to the docs, and the doc said, "Hey, why don't you just try to stop yelling?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, doc. Why don't you stop breathing?" And so, they tried multiple different avenues with medicine, and they did the CAT scans. They tried everything, and nothing worked. And then the doc said, "Hey, we're going to put you on something called oxycodone." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." Like, he goes, "No, no, no, no. This is addictive." And I'm like, "Dude, come on." I'm killing it in life. We're winning championships. I'm on the Jumbotron. Like, I'm on ESPN, like all these things. I know I'm the strength coach at Alabama. There's no way I'm not the guy under the bridge. I won't get addicted to these things. And, within 6 months, that doc basically said, "I'm not writing you anymore." And he saw I was having, struggled with it, and was like, "You're done, no more." And so I found other docs that would write me the script, because it worked. It's the craziest thing. My migraines were really awful. It was like a vice in my temples, like just cranking every group, every day, it was just getting worse and worse. And then I get this pill, and my headache's gone. Oh my God. And I can coach all day. I don't have to worry about, oh, I can't yell because, my head's gonna hurt. I can actually yell. I can coach. I can be me. And sure enough, I got hooked. And it was just an ugly, dark, dark path,
I do understand. I mean, and I think you're so courageous to tell the story the way that you do. And it's around 2020 that you leave Alabama to come to Georgia. And I believe you've sort of said that in making that move, you were hoping that, hey, a change in geography, a different place might create a different mindset. And suddenly this battle that you were pretty clearly in the midst of, that you hoped it might get better simply because you were working in a different place. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. And so my thought was, if I left strength and conditioning, if I left Alabama, I wouldn't have to yell. I wouldn't have to, be on 24/7, so to speak. And I'll stop taking these pills. But the the part they don't tell you, right, is you go through this thing called withdrawals. And I'll be, I'm not going to walk in the door as a special teams coordinator and be sick for 2 weeks, because you feel like you have the flu.
Yeah.
And so my intake got worse as my disease just progressed and got worse until April 10th, 2020. I overdosed. My wife found me during COVID. She found me dead on the ground in our house. Very, very sad moment. Big wake up call, I guess, to the wife. After coming to in the hospital, I went to get help, but I didn't tell anybody because it was COVID, so I could do everything on Zoom. I had it all figured out, and so once COVID lifted and we were able to get back into the facility, I left rehab and went in, and I'm thinking, oh man, I got this thing beat. It's good. I'm good to go. I don't ever have to worry about taking a pill again. And not 2 months later, I'm right back where I was. And when you go to rehab, they ask you, okay, what doctors were prescribing this to you, right? And so they call those docs and they say, hey, never write a script for this person again.
Yeah.
And so now I don't have doctors to call. Now I'm literally buying it off the street. So I am blessed beyond measure to be here today, because any one of those pills could have killed me.
Wow.
I was addicted to fentanyl, and the stuff that was in my system should have killed me. But God has me here for a greater purpose, and that's why I wrote the book Skull Session.
Well, we hope everybody gets a chance to read that. As you say, Skull Session is the book. A couple more minutes here with Coach Cochran, who's been kind enough to share his time with us here today. And I think the part of your story that I relate to so much is that for guys, I'm sure gals too, but I'm a man, so I sort of know this from the position of a man. It's like when you're in the midst of your career, you don't want to slow down. The idea of slowing down feels scary. And in your particular case, you were doing everything you could to kind of keep that pace up, to the point where it became unavoidable. What was it like for you? Painful conversations, I'm sure, where you and your wife have to confront what she obviously saw and the fact that it's just objectively true. You're lucky to be alive after that. And then to tell Coach Smart what he was not aware of. Hey, Coach Smart, I'm sorry. I've got something going on that you need to know. That's a scary conversation for a lot of people. What was it like?
Let me tell you this. I got to jump in right there, because the way that Coach Smart handled it was a blessing from God. I don't, in the middle of my battle, he was able to say, how can I help you? Instead of, oh, we're going to have to take your job away from you. We're going to have to fire you. We're going to get rid of you. Mm-hmm. His response was, the exact words out of his mouth when I told him were, how can I help you and your family?
Wow.
At this time, I'm like, whoa, I'm crying on the phone to this man. Like, I'm going to lose my job. I'm not going to be able to provide for my family. And he says, how can I help you and your family? That's who Kirby Smart is. That defines him as a human being. That one moment just tells you who he is and what he really cares about.
So one final question for me, and then I want to make sure you let everybody know exactly where they can find the brand new book. So obviously in the aftermath of all this, you're still, and the interview obviously proves this to be true, still the same energetic guy you've always been, fresh, brand new perspective on life, going about things now obviously a completely different way. For our audience who kind of wants more of that, I'm sure, and I know you go more into this in the book, like how do you maintain, even after all of this, what you've been through and kind of the fresh new perspective on life, how do you maintain this level of energy that's made you famous to so many of the folks in our audience for the impact that you've had on the game of football? How do you maintain that?
I honestly tried my hardest to put that on paper in this book. I really tried to explain how to get the energy and the joy for life. how to find that. Either it's in your work, it's in your life, whatever you're pursuing. I really tried to put that on paper for people, because I don't think it takes one word answer to this. I don't think it's a sentence. I think it's a deep dive into who you are as an individual and finding out your purpose and your passion, and then going after it with, the attention to detail that's necessary. I'm living my best life right now. I'm the head coach at West Alabama. And we're a little small D2,
Sure.
and we're gonna punch and scream and claw our way through games. But I tried to put all of that into my book, The Skull Session, because I do believe that taking where you are right now and you're trying to achieve something, it's just not. People don't put it out for you. It's not as simple as take this, take that step. And I tried to put that on paper so that people could understand, like, this is for you. You don't have to overdose and almost die to live the life that I'm living today. There's things you can do. And I tried to put that in this book, along with telling my story and telling some SEC stories, telling some stories about Coach Saban, some stories about Kirby, and it's a fun book, but it's to help you get to that level that you're looking for. I walk in God's grace and mercy every day, but I don't do that without gratitude. And, there's parts in the book about gratitude. It's about how to write your goals down. How do you even do that? Here's the baby steps that I've taken, multiple teams through, and had a lot of success.
It's an important message. It's all part of the brand new book, Skull Session, Mastering the Mental Game in Sports, Work, and in Life. August 19th. It's available everywhere. Coach Cochran, for people who want to kind of connect with the book, find out more about it, including purchasing it, where can they go? What do they need to do to kind of connect with this brand new book?
I know you can get pre-orders on Amazon. I know you can get pre-orders through Books A Million. There's the Audible version. It's everywhere. And it is out officially August 19th. I'm the first one to get a copy. Finally, I have my own copy. It's got my ugly mug on it. But you'll be able to find it on Amazon pre-order, or Books A Million, or an Audible. Come check. Just have a sit down. It's not a long read. It's me telling a few stories, and hopefully my goal is to help every individual that picks up the book to want to give it to someone else after they read it, because it impacted you that much.
I think that's a beautiful message. I do.
Yeah.
I do. Great stuff, Coach. Best of luck to West Alabama here this season. Continued success for you, and hopefully everybody will get a chance to hear more of your stories as part of the brand new book, Skull Session. Coach, we'll look forward to getting our chance to speak to you very soon, but thank you so much for telling your story here today.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all.
Coach, that was awesome. I hope that worked out well for you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Really powerful stuff there from Scott Cochran. His brand new book, Skull Sessions, is everywhere now. That is Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, all the major booksellers, of course, online as well, Amazon. What a personal story, told well by Coach Cochran, I believe inspiring to many. We've got another great guest here coming up, Davin Bellamy. Before that, though, let me get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. As sometimes happens, we're running a little behind schedule here, so I'm going to give a shout-out to Royal. We'll talk to Davin Bellamy, and then I got a couple of stories, including a chance to make fun of Auburn, which we never pass up on. We will do this here coming up in a moment. Before that, as we said, cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And boy, Star of the Seas is the talk of the world here right now after its debut. And I think one of the things that people are most excited about when it comes to Star of the Seas, Royal Caribbean really likes to push the envelope when it comes to onboard entertainment. The sort of entertainment you might expect to get in Las Vegas or Broadway or something like that. That is what Royal Caribbean brings to its cruise ships, including the very special kind of Broadway-style show on Star of the Seas, believe it or not, is Back to the Future. And if you're watching on video, you see a little bit of a look at what Back to the Future on Star of the Seas is going to be. Hard to believe this kind of presentation, this kind of show is available in the theater on a cruise ship. It's amazing. I understand that the DeLorean even flies in the theater on board Star of the Seas. So if you love the movie, you'll love the show. It's just a part of the many great experiences you get to have while on board Star of the Seas. So Jessica Slater, she's been on it. I'm jealous of her for that. But you can have the same experience on board Star of the Seas. All the great things going down. Give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. All right, we got more stories coming up, cruise around the SEC here coming up in just a minute. I don't want to keep our next guest waiting, though, because we got a lot going on as it relates to Georgia football, so let's transition. Let's bring in Davin Bellamy here today. Davin, appreciate you. Always love having you on the show. Obviously, a lot of Georgia fans really excited about the start of the upcoming season, and I got to ask you, as a player yourself, putting yourself back in that time at the University of Georgia. So fall camp is done. You're not sleeping in the hotel anymore. It's not quite game week yet, but you can sort of feel it coming around the corner. I know how fans get last-minute plans for tailgates. Everybody's kind of, sort of talking their last little bit of trash before the year gets going. What's it like being a player here just before the start of the season? What's the energy like as they get ready to kind of put the pads on, go out and play in front of a crowd, get a chance to hit somebody else instead of each other for the first time in a while? What's the energy level like for these players here at the moment?
Yeah, Brandon. I mean, you said it perfectly. I mean, these guys, they're tired of, hitting the same, people. You're watching all these videos of the other teams, and you're just ready to play. I mean, you're starting to get that feel around UGA that it's football time. It just smells different. The weather is starting to change. So these guys have been going at it for weeks now, no sleep, hitting the same people, running the same plays, and it's starting to get a little boring at this time. I mean, Georgia brand, football is very, physical, especially, at practice. But right now, you're tired of, hitting your brother, as hard as you can. So kind of, around this time, the physicality has laid off a little bit of going against your brother because you want to make sure he's ready to go, when the game starts. So just that ready to go-ness and just ready to go, fight somebody else.
I think you bring up an interesting point, and Kirby Smart actually kind of talked about a version of that yesterday too, which is, okay, well, a year ago, Georgia wasn't great against the run. You got to tackle better to be better against the run, but tackling to the ground in practice is obviously fertile soil for potential injuries. And so, we've seen in the NFL where, at least the best that I can tell, the kind of physicality of practice has kind of been taken out of that version of the sport. I know you spent time in the NFL and other professional leagues. Maybe you can speak more to that. But it seems like coaches at all levels are now dealing with the challenge of, okay, we want our teams to be physical during the game. We've got to practice that in order to be that. But honestly, if we come out here with too much Bloody Tuesday, all of a sudden we're losing starters and we got guys banged up because of how hard we're grinding during practice. And it sounds like every coach, Kirby Smart included, is trying to figure out how to thread that needle of getting the physicality without being so physical that you leave yourself open to injury, right?
Right. I mean, I went back to Georgia about, 2 years ago, and I talked to Coach Sinclair, and he said that, Coach Smart learned from, my senior year of kind of running the team into the ground. And then when you get into these playoffs, that's the team run out of gas. So he learned from that through trial and error. So he's definitely gotten better, over the years in trying to make sure the players make it to week one, and just last. But I think when it comes to being at Georgia, that is what sets us apart from playing, the other teams, is how physical we are and how hard he makes, practice. I look back at that Georgia Tech game last year, and then I think the game I think it was Texas. We went back to back of playing, hard overtime ball. And that comes from the preparation of the guys already having harder, practices that they're really can go longer than the other team. But there is, a fine balance. The only thing with Georgia is we struggled being the more, physical team last year. So I just know it's tough finding that balance to try to correct that, because the only way you can correct being physical is to be more physical. And we had a lot of young guys last year that probably wasn't used to the physicality of the SEC, especially up front. So it's that fine balance of just trying to get this team to get back to Georgia, football. And then, when you think about camp, if you can't survive camp because of the physicality, then can you survive the 12 to 13 weeks in the SEC? So it kind of a weeding out period, also. So it's a fine balance, but you got to keep the physicality.
Something else we talked about on the show before you joined us was what has been a big concerted effort for Georgia to kind of upgrade its rushing attack this year compared to what was a year ago. Not quite what Georgia fans are sort of used to it being. And obviously, your final year at Georgia, you had one of the great duos, maybe the best tandem of running backs ever played together in college football before, Sony Michel and Nick Chubb. I guess, as a player, how comforting was it knowing that when your team had the ball, you're going to be able to get those good hard yards in the ground and the explosive runs too? And how important is it for Georgia to get back to that here this year? And I guess, what do you think the outlook is that Georgia might be able to actually have, maybe not Chubb Michel level success, because Georgia honestly throws it a lot more than it used to, but just more success than it has had maybe the last couple of years?
Well, speaking from a defensive guy, when you got a team that is running the ball and you got players like Chubb, and Sony, and we're getting 4 yards to carry. Well, one, the defense is getting a lot of break, and we know that we're controlling the clock. So their offense won't have a lot of time to, try to put points up against us. And you just see it just physically wearing down the other team. It's one thing to get a 30-yard gain through the air, but it's another thing to run the ball 5 times, and you just constantly getting 4 yards here, 4 yards here, 4 yards here. Coach Smart used to always say, watch how slow the other team defensive linemen start to get up, and watch how fast we get back to the huddle. So when you start, to watch that, as a defense, it gives you more mojo to say, let's go out there and get a 3 and out. Because if we put these guys back on the field, they're going to run the ball 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 more times, and they're going to get up slower, off the ground. So it just wears down the team. But I think Georgia, is getting back, to that brand. We got, Josh McCray, who's a big back. He almost 200, and 30 pounds. And, it's Nate Frazier's second year. So I'm expecting a lot of big things, out of him. He's very explosive. And I think we can have that 1-2 punch of, thunder and lightning. And just to get back to that is kind of what we've already been talking about, is being more physical, at practice. And maybe last year, Coach Smart took his foot off the gas on being that hard at practice. But in my opinion, this camp, I'm pretty sure those guys got, right back to it, because the only way we can make sure that, Gunner Stockton has the best year, possible is to make his job a little easier. And that's not having 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s. That's running the ball, getting 3 yards on first down, and really setting us up for 3rd and medium. So Gunner can use his legs, but if we can't run the ball, then it's going to be a long year. So just getting back to that, is very important.
Well, speaking of Gunner Stockton, I think it's interesting, Kirby Smart, unlike some coaches, doesn't really name starting quarterbacks, kind of sidestep the chance to officially name Gunner as the starter, although we all know he's going to be and is the starting quarterback for Georgia. And it kind of plays into what we see happening a lot around college football right now, where guys like certainly Arch Manning at Arch Manning at Texas, but even like, say, a Type Sims in Alabama or a DJ Lagway at Florida, there are a lot of quarterbacks, even within the SEC, that are going to get a lot more attention than Gunner Stockton's going to get here at Georgia. We think that Stockton has a chance to be successful, but he is not going to get the sort of attention that other quarterbacks are getting. What do you make and what do you think about Georgia kind of having that quarterback that sort of flies under the radar this year compared to some of his contemporaries around the sport?
I love it. I mean, he's a guy that he probably don't even want it. He's not going to have a social media girlfriend. He's not going to drive, a Lamborghini truck. He's an old school guy. He goes to work and goes home. So I just don't see this bothering him, or do I pay, any extra attention to it. He just seems like a guy that's still driving his car, from high school. He reminds me of Jake Fromm, just a blue collar guy, not worried about, everything else is going on around him. He's just putting all his eggs into being the best quarterback that he can be. I mean, he's probably the type guy that doesn't even have, social media or doesn't even look at it. So I just think this follows his persona just perfectly, flying under the radar, going to work, going home, chopping wood and carrying water, and just trying to be the best quarterback that he can be for Georgia football.
I love it, Davin. I appreciate your time as always. And by the way, the next time you and I speak, we'll only be a couple of days away from the start of a Georgia football game, which is a very, very good thing after a very long offseason. It's great to have football back. Davin, I appreciate your insight on it. Can't wait to go through the season with you, and we'll look forward to having you very soon here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management.
Yes, sir. And you know what? Always go Dogs.
Go Dogs indeed. Great stuff there from Davin Bellamy. And something that Davin says kind of reminds me a little bit of the other day, Dylan Gabriel, the recent draft pick of the Cleveland Browns. He has a good preseason game, whatever else. And he's being interviewed after the game, and he's like, I'm a competitor, not an entertainer. And I think a lot of people kind of took that as like a jab at Shedeur Sanders, who's also in the Cleveland Browns. And who knows? I'm a long way away from Northeast Ohio. Maybe it was a jab at Shedeur Sanders. Frankly, I don't really care. But the line itself stood out to me because Gunner Stockton is not an entertainer. He is not here to entertain you. He is not here to provide you social media fodder or content for shows. He is not here to be your hot topic necessarily. He just wants to compete. And I do think that's a welcome change. Not because everybody hates the previous quarterback or anything like that. I just think, as Davin Bellamy said, leaping at the chance to say, oh, I love having a quarterback that's under the radar. I do think players do kind of like that. A quarterback that wants to kind of be in the trenches with them, at least theoretically, as opposed to a guy that's sort of going to float above and, have all of the sort of trappings that go along with being the sort of celebrity player. Famously, Bill Parcells once said one of his key rules was you don't want to draft a celebrity quarterback. I think there's a remnant of that is still true. The more sort of celebrity aura you have about you, the more it kind of presents a problem. I don't think money really does that. Look, football is not an egalitarian sport. It's just not. And that's one of the reasons why it kind of causes problems for people. There are some guys just stronger. There are some coaches that are just smarter. Football is not an egalitarian sport. Hierarchies exist. I think the players are pretty comfortable with that. So-and-so is going to make more money. So-and-so is going to make a little less. I think players actually are more at peace with that sometimes, college and pro, soon to be maybe high school, than we sometimes give them credit for. But the celebrity stuff I think is annoying. I do. I think players think a lot of that is annoying. So if I had to guess, there are a good number of Georgia players that probably, much the same way that Davin answers quickly when he says, yeah, boy, I love a quarterback that's under the radar. I think there are a few Georgia players that perhaps probably feel the same way. Now, before we're done, there are a couple of stories I got to hit. Can we go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean here just for a moment? We've got to make fun of Auburn here for a second. So this happened yesterday while we were in our R.S. Andrews cool down. Out of nowhere, Auburn just, in golf, we call this pencil whipping. If you ever play like a four-man scramble and you feel like you shot a pretty good score, but come to find out, like somebody says they shot like a 37. Like there's a lot of pencil whipping that goes on in golf where people just sort of make up scores out of thin air. Well, Auburn yesterday tried to pencil whip the rest of the SEC and I guess the rest of college football by claiming out of thin air 4 new national championships. Now, this is dumb, partially because like one of the championships they claimed was 2004. It's one thing to say you won the national championship in 1910. Who knows? That's the year the Titanic sank. You know, I don't know that any of us were alive in 1910. I guess mathematically that's impossible. So who knows? If you won the national title in the early 1900s, maybe you did. There's no one alive that can say that one way or another. But I was alive in 2004, and I saw that year. You can make a case that Auburn should have been in the BCS title game. They certainly were a very good team. They beat Georgia. You can make a lot of cases about a lot of things. But you can't say they won the national championship because we saw who did. I feel like we have living memory that didn't happen. So that in itself seems like a pretty specious claim. But what might surprise you is my overall take on this a little bit different than you might think for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is Auburn claims 4. I have said for a long time, I want Georgia to claim at least one more national championship than it currently does. I think that Georgia is well within its rights to claim the 1946 national championship. They should have done it a couple of years ago while they were reigning national champs. You're putting up a new number for 2022. You might as well put one up for 1946. I think Georgia's well within its rights to do this. So the fact that Auburn's doing this now, I can't make too big of a deal about it because I think that Georgia should claim more national championships than it does. Here's the second thing. There's a certain kind of gamesmanship to me about this where who is the fan base most likely to mock Auburn for what it did? That's Alabama. But here's the deal. You know, Alabama's logo, they like to have like the number 18 on the side of their helmet. That's supposedly the number of national championships that the program has won. But that so-called story's history is at best an exaggeration. Some of those championships are like multiple lost seasons. They didn't win the SEC. You know, if Auburn's guilty of kind of pencil whipping now, Alabama has a little bit of pencil whipping in its past too. In fact, it's got kind of a lot of it. So by Auburn claiming these championships in a roundabout way, it also sort of shines a light on what Alabama once did to kind of conjure some championships out of thin air, which I think makes Auburn at least clever in this particular sense. But the final thing, and the other reason why I can't get that mad about this as some others do, I think there is something to be said for we do not care what people think about us because everybody in the world is making fun of Auburn today. The fact that Auburn is still doing this, even though everyone is making fun of them, I don't hate that. Because, I mean, I would say at times there are programs out there that get just a little too worried of what will people think if we ... What will people think if we do this? What will people think if we do that? Auburn pretty clearly is not worried about that, which perhaps is a little bit of a signal that maybe others should be a little less worried about that too. Very quickly, 2 other stories. So DJ Lagway is apparently back practicing for Florida again, which as someone who tries to follow the SEC, I have to admit, when I first read that, I was like, hold on, what's he been doing? Apparently not very much. So Lagway had the shoulder, also hurt, the ankle? And has only just now kind of become something of a full participant in practice, but apparently he was not a full go for the scrimmage that Florida just had. I'm a big believer of all the teams that are getting a little bit of positive buzz, a season win total of around 7.5, which is pretty high compared to the schedule that Florida plays. I think there is a chance this team is an absolute disaster because DJ Lagway can't stay healthy. Or the kind of, I guess, obsession that Florida is forced to have about how healthy he is, I think also sort of speaks in the face of a daunting schedule, how little Florida has going for it other than that. Billy Napier in November was essentially fired, and then he saved himself with 4 straight wins. I think it's important to remember just how precarious of a spot Florida found itself in not all that long ago, and the sort of shaky health condition of DJ Lagway apparently still lingers. This is something worth monitoring. I'll also mention this here really quickly, too. I saw where Arch Manning had to push back on a rumor that was essentially not started by Archie Manning, his grandfather, but certainly furthered by Archie, where Archie Manning said his grandson Arch he believed would stay in college 2 years. Arch Manning said, I'm not sure where my grandfather got that. We got a lot to consider before we ever get to there on that. Arch Manning has not tried to fan the flames on his own hype and his own hysteria. But consider this just for a moment. I found Arch to be likable at SEC Media Days. I'm not anti-Arch. People that I know that know quarterback play think Arch is going to be pretty good. I trust them. But boy, this is weird, isn't it? It's weird to have a guy like this being talked about that way before he even has his first full year of starting. We are presuming a lot, in other words. A guy who hasn't really been a full season starter yet is going to have the choice of, will he leave after this year and go on to be the first overall pick in the NFL draft? Or will he come back to college in 2026 with a huge NIL deal and then go do the same thing the year after that? Boy, that sounds really presumptuous, doesn't it? And listen, I'm not anti-Arch. I'm anti-Texas, but I'm not anti-Arch. It's a dangerous conversation, man, for a guy that just hasn't proven anything yet. Even if I think Arch is pretty good and likely to be pretty good, this conversation is getting a little bit weird. I just can't help but you just can't help but notice it. It will make that cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, before we wrap up today, I want to give you a quick note about something just for a second. So coming up next week on Tuesday, we have a really fun thing we're going to do, a chance to be out live in the public, something we love. We're going to be at the Cercheros location in Alpharetta. That's 91 South Main Street in Alpharetta for a special live broadcast from Cercheros that day. You know Cercheros. It's the great fresh Mex that's growing all over the state of Georgia and throughout the South. Now, our show's up is going to start at normal time. Cercheros will open at 10:30, so you can pop in there and say hello to us, grab some lunch, and just enjoy the awesome experience. The Cercheros in Alpharetta, that's 91 South Main Street. We're kind of celebrating the start of the season. Cercheros, a great spot for you for your pregame tailgate party, watch party, things like that. So we'll see you this upcoming Tuesday, August 26th at the Cercheros in Alpharetta. I do truly hope you'll come out and see us. And as we wrap up here today, we'll get ready to do so with the Golden Shoe. We just got through cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And by the way, each and every April, we've been lucky enough to have our DawgNation cruise. Many folks who join us every year, some folks who join us for the first time. Tim Owens writes in to say, my wife gave me a DawgNation cruise for 2026 for my birthday. I am so excited. And to Tim, I would say, what a birthday present that's going to be. A chance to be on Utopia of the Seas in April with DawgNation. Tim, that is an awesome thing. I am thrilled about that for you. You've got a great wife, obviously, if that's the kind of birthday present she's giving you, which, if we're being honest, also sounds like a bit of a birthday present for her. So that's great. We can't wait to be on board with you. We'll see you in April. It'll be here before you know it. Awesome stuff there. And, of course, happy birthday to you as well. Lousy, stinking Gators, Lagways, I guess still a little banged up or whatever else. We think the entire Florida program is going to be banged up after Georgia handles them once again. About 1,746 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater Updater. You'll have a great day. We're back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily presented by Breda Pest Management. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on that. So we're at Cercheros on Tuesday. We also have something else really fun. At least I'm a part of something else really fun next Thursday. I can't wait to reveal all the details to you about this. I think it's going to be a great experience. Something you're going to really, really like. I can't wait to get the green light to tell you all about this. That's going to be just an awesome experience. So can't wait for that. If you want to kind of see some really fun football talk in person, we've got an event coming up on Thursday. That's not this Thursday, but next Thursday, August 28th in Athens. I think you're going to really like this. We'll tell you more about that here coming up. Yeah, so really good stuff there. All right, let me get DawgNation.com on the comment section to kind of begin things here, and then we will see what's going on. Matt Rukavina checking in. Always good to see him. SEM Dog says UGA should definitely claim the 1946 national title. Northern bias against Southern teams had a lot to do with that. When Herschel was playing in the early 1980s, there were still people saying that Charlie Trippi was the best player they'd ever seen. He was the star of the 46 team and should have won the Heisman. Yeah, I think that this is just what happens for our generation now, looking back at previous generations. I think they think that the greatest sort of early era Georgia player of all time was Frank Sinkwich, and he might have been. But I can tell you that my grandfathers both thought that Charlie Trippi was probably better than Sinkwich was, and they would have been alive to have experienced that. And so, yeah, I mean, Trippi became a number 1 overall draft pick, went on to a great career with the Chicago Cardinals, and was kind of the leader of that 46 team. Based on the research that I've done, very deserving. And the other thing is, as someone who's tried to go back and kind of learn about these previous eras, I know this sounds like something I would say, but you wouldn't believe how much sort of an anti-Southern bias existed with college football at that time. And this is one of the reasons why, while I like making fun of some of these teams that kind of claim these national titles and things like that, there was this belief that the South wasn't playing real college football back then. The South has always had to fight for its place at the table. To this day, still does. Even though it's the most popular brand of the sport, still having to fight, for its place at the table. National conversation, for instance. The type of person that usually gets the big national media jobs and things like that. The South has sort of always had to fight for its spot here. And 1940s, 1950s, that was especially true. So some of the claiming of national championships, I'm actually less angered about than you might think, just because you can go and read this in just sort of plain bold print, a pretty high degree of anti-Southern bias in the kind of mid-century portion of college football. Thomas T-Bone 86 says, 10 more days to the Dogs kickoff. You love that. Ken Holcomb says, what an intense interview with Coach Cochran. Prayers for him and his family. Yeah, I wanted to give him space to tell his story. I think it's important to do, and I hope folks will check out his book. But we wanted to allow him to tell his story today because, look, in an audience the size of ours, the odds are people are dealing with something similar to what Coach Cochran has dealt with. And, I hope that story is inspiring to many people. It's also interesting to hear from someone who's worked so closely with Kirby Smart. But hopefully the part of what Cochran has overcome to be where he is now, hopefully that will inspire people. I hope it will anyway. By the way, good to see Caleb Myers in the comments section. Feels like we hadn't seen Caleb in a couple of days, but I'm glad he's here today. Saying, what's your preparation look like for the show every day? How do you come up with the stuff every day to keep it DawgNation Daily? We really appreciate you getting through the off season. So it's something I very much enjoy doing. And I'll tell you a quick story. When we started in our first year, so we started in August of 2015. So we're actually going into year 11. We've now done a full 10 years, started in August of 2015. So our first summer doing the show would have been summer of 2016. And I had some people tell me, I thought this was really interesting. I had some people tell me that, BA, that first summer, I listened to the show just to hear if you'd have something to talk about. I just wanted to see if you could find something to say every day, because I was a big believer that my chance to make something that mattered and to do something that had the potential for some staying power, it needed to be DawgNation Daily. It needed to be a reflection of whatever the Georgia conversation was on a day-to-day basis. That's what it needed to be. And so this is, for me, something I very much enjoy doing. In a weird way, I enjoy preparing for the show as much, if not more so, than actually doing the show. I like looking for stuff to talk about, or looking at the things that are going on and saying, do I have a unique perspective on this? Can I say something about this that is maybe a little bit different than what you might get other places? Maybe sometimes we achieve that, maybe sometimes we don't, but that's the starting point for me. And, prior to doing DawgNation Daily for a long time, I'd done like regular sports radio and stuff like that. I'd gotten a lot of experience over the years doing, like, say, summer shows in the weekend, where also it seemed like, hey, there wasn't very much going on, but you got to be on the air, so therefore you got to think of something to talk about. And, muscles can be strengthened, skills can be developed. And so over the long period of years, when really there was nobody listening, very few people cared, but it was a chance for me to practice and just get better at my craft. Some would say I still need to get better, and you're probably right. But early days, that's what I did, trying to sharpen the saw a bit and just learn how to think of something to talk about, even when there wasn't theoretically anything to discuss. And so that's what I bring here to DawgNation Daily, because here's the thing. Georgia fans always want to have a conversation about Georgia football. They always do. That's how the passion for Georgia football is expressed. So you've got a permission structure already in place. People want to talk Georgia football. All you have to do as the host is give them a reason to do so. And so every morning, that's what I wake up very early, always have. That's what I do. I simply look for an excuse for us to talk about Georgia football. And once I find it, I know we've got a show. Thank you for asking, Caleb. And DT, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. George on tap reminding us of something very important, that Mr. Trippy also had to take a couple of years off to go to war, for goodness sakes. That's exactly right. George on tap's absolutely right about that. It's another reason that 46 team, I think, should be remembered more fondly, is guys like and in golf we do the thing with the surname and the titles of Mr. Hogan, for instance, Mr. Nicholas. Golfers kind of get. I think we need to normalize that for we should refer to people like Charlie Trippy as Mr. Trippy, Mr. Sinkwich. Doesn't the New York Times do that, where it always references people by their surname like that? But the same way that's a big part of golf, we should reference him as Mr. Trippy. I like that. Very good idea. Green Soldier, by the way, great to see him, says, could not imagine losing twice to the same team in one calendar year. An obvious reference to Texas, which I love. That's great stuff from our buddy, the Green Soldier. Scott Pete says, I've seen 3 national titles, every home game in 1980. Hope to get one more while I'm still looking down at the grass. I like that, Scott. I hope we can get you one more, too. That's awesome. Jonathan Aaron says, what NFL quarterback and running back would you want on your team during their prime? That's a good question. I guess you'd probably have to say Brady, right? I mean, Patrick Mahomes is probably getting close, but you'd have to say Brady, I think, on that. Running back wise, I don't know. I guess Barry Sanders is probably the best that I've seen. I guess that's probably true. Bo Molinari, who our resident Texas A&M fan, says Georgia's schedule is insane this year, only 3 true road games. Well, it is factually true there's only 3 true road games. But, the idea that somehow Georgia plays an easy schedule this year, I feel like that has been incorrectly portrayed. I mean, if you care about even the analytics metrics, still have it, top 15, top 10, top 15 schedule, something like that. We think, improved Auburn, the potential for improved Florida. It's still a non-conference game against Tech. People act like Georgia doesn't play a non-conference game. As I said before, for whatever reason, Georgia's the one team that plays at least one Power 4 non-conference team every year and gets no credit for doing so. It's bizarre to me. Bizarre. So I think the schedule for Georgia actually probably has a chance to be about as tough this year as it was a year ago. But it is to Georgia's advantage to only play 3 true road games. I don't dispute that. Anonymous Handle says some people are projecting Missouri to be a sleeper team. It is probably my favorite over in the SEC. 7.5. At one point in time, I think you might could have found a 7. But 7.5 for Missouri, it is my favorite over of the entire SEC, I believe. Bo says he didn't say it was easy. Yeah, I guess I'm a little sensitive about that, Bo, because others have. Tiger Time thinks that Dabo Swinney wins another national championship. So perhaps not a surprise that Tiger Time would think that. But Tiger Time, I'm glad you're checking in on the show here today. G. Grace says that Kirby Smart's best coaching job was last year. Georgia was above average. He coached that team up. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's the case. I mean, I certainly think he did a very good job with the team a year ago. You know, I don't know that Georgia was above average. Georgia just wasn't very dominant, you know. But they were clearly, you know, they were deficient in a couple of key areas a year ago. And then obviously, you know, put them in a tough spot. So I guess from that standpoint, it's not unfair necessarily. Anonymous Handle says he thinks that Oklahoma gets the better of Texas. Oklahoma is one of those SEC teams that I must admit I'm a little bit down on for this year. I think their schedule's sneaky pretty tough. Much the same way we say of like Billy Napier. People forget just how fired he was at one point in time. Boy, Brent Venables was like on the absolute doorstep of being fired. And all of a sudden now, you know, the AP poll has him in the top 20. Boy, that seems like a lot, you know, on the basis of a couple of transfers. I just don't know.
Somebody was in front of you.
You know, I just don't know necessarily how much one or two transfers, even if one of them is a quarterback, changes all of that. Billy Cloud wants to leave the playoff schedule alone. Well, I certainly don't like the Big Ten idea of making it 24, 28 teams. You know, Kirby Smart yesterday said he could be open to the idea of playoff expansion. And it sounds like he's growing a little bit more ambivalent about the future of the SEC title game. Now, he's also not thinking about that necessarily right now. He's getting ready to start his season, so I won't hold him to everything he said in that answer yesterday. I'm telling you right now, the SEC's got to be careful. SEC has to be careful. There is an attempt to, is it homogenize? How you say the word? Homogenize? There is an attempt to homogenize college football. To make it into something that's a little more even across the board. And there's this dream of, well, we can make even more money on our rights fees, media rights, if we'll just band together and we'll sell the whole sport as a package. I'm telling you right now, I think that is a trap, and I don't think the SEC should fall into it. I think the boardroom people who are saying, boy, you can get twice as much money in the future media rights deal than you currently have. I'm not very bullish on that. I'm really not. I think that college football is a regional sport. I think the regions are not equal, as I said during the show. One of the things that kind of causes some angst among some people is the fact that college football in general, in this case we're talking about college football, it's just not an egalitarian sport. Not everybody does it the same way. Not everybody has the same chance at success. There are natural occurring hierarchies. And there's not much you can do about it. And our region's just better. And so what other people will tell the SEC is, if you'll just get rid of your championship game, even though that's big business, and if you'll just get rid of your sense of regional pride, even though your region matters more so than these other regions do, we'll all come together. We'll be flat and equal and the same. It'll be just nice and clean. And then we'll take our unified negotiating position. We'll go to market and we'll get even more money by being uniform and the same and all under the same umbrella. I think that is a pipe dream. I don't believe there is some high ceiling out there of even more media rights than currently exist, even though college football is obviously very popular. If anything, I think the opposite might be true. We may find out there's a little bit of a media rights bubble out there once linear TV collapses, because it's really in many ways linear TV that has driven up the price in all this, because linear TV has been dependent on football to survive. CBS, NBC, They wouldn't even be networks anymore if there wasn't for the NFL. What it means to be a network would just kind of be lost. They exist as a network because of football. Fox may be the same way. Fox would sort of just be Hulu. CBS would sort of just be Paramount. NBC would sort of just be Peacock if it didn't have the NFL. And so therefore, some of this huge financial windfall for the various sports is because the TV networks have viewed football as a reason to exist, a raison d'etre, if you will. And if that ever goes away, I don't know that the rights fee stuff is going to keep climbing the way that people think it is. Jonathan Aaron says, what do you think about Hugh Freeze saying that he may play all three quarterbacks in the first game? I do think Auburn has more quarterback depth than the average team does. I do think that, Deuce Knight especially. I also think this is his way of trying to keep quarterbacks happy. Everybody knows that if you've got multiple quarterbacks capable of playing, you've probably got some unhappy guys in your roster because they feel like they could be playing somewhere else. I think that Jackson Arnold is probably Auburn's guy, and I think he's probably going to be pretty good. He certainly has some very good receivers to throw to. So this is sort of Hugh Freeze in his awkward way trying to acknowledge the fact they do have quarterback depth. I believe he's right. And he wants to keep the guys on the roster as happy as he can keep them, and we'll see if he's capable of doing that. Let us see what else. Gary Westmiller said, I would love to hear more from Coach Cochran. I'm guessing in future years you might. But I'm glad you enjoyed that today. Philip Jordan Wells laughing at me for saying homogenize. That is a word, though, right? That's how you say it, right? Homogenize? That's a thing, right? I believe that's the right. Let's see what else. Is this true? Philip Jordan Wells says one of the teams that won the title in 1946 was Army. So there you go. Gary Westmiller would like to hear more from Coach Cochran. Yeah, I appreciate that, Gary. Gary Holt says he was shocked when Kirby Smart didn't have a problem expanding the playoff. So there is, like I said, there are some things that Kirby Smart says that I just absolutely believe he absolutely means. There are other things I sometimes think he says without really thinking very much about it. Yesterday, when it comes to the playoff expansion thing, I don't know how much he was even really thinking about what he said. Maybe that was his actual opinion, or maybe he was just sort of talking. Sometimes we just sort of talk, and then there's no delete key in life. Not that he said anything all that controversial, but there is certainly a more measured version of Kirby on topics like that when it comes to like spring meetings in Destin, when Smart's kind of thinking that way. If Smart's thinking about one thing, you ask him about this, you may get a different kind of answer. But you'll notice this. For those of you that listen to a lot of the press conference stuff, the best Kirby's always post-game, because that's the moment when Smart's not quite as filtered. And sometimes you get some that's a little juicier. Bo Molinari does confirm that homogenized is a great word. There you go. Spencer Clark says he liked the BCS better. I'm pro college football playoff. I just wish it functioned better. I wish the people that run it were college football fans, capable of having a college football conversation and capable of making college football evaluations. They are not. I wish they were. The playoff is good. It's just ruined by the people who run it. Let us see what else. Brad Morgan's trying to draw me off sides into a topic we're not going to discuss, but good to see Brad in here. UGA Marine would like to see the SEC kind of run its own version of college football. I think there's some chance that one day that's what happens. I do. And I'd be okay with that. I really would. Given the choice of, hey, we're all the same and we're all in it together, or we're going to protect what has made college football special in our region, it should not be a surprise to you that I would prefer the latter over the former. I just think that, Admiral Akbar style, some of the stuff that they're trying to get folks to do is a trap. It is a trap and should be viewed as such. UJ Marine, speaking of the unfiltered Kirby, mentioning post-game on the field in Austin. Yeah, you really get some of that. Some of the more memorable things that Kirby has said has been kind of in those type of moments. Jan Armistead also enjoyed Coach Cochran today. I'm glad to hear that, Jan. Thank you. So Philip Jordan Will says, homogenization is the process of decontaminating milk, but homogenize, see, now I can't say it. Homogenize is a word. But that means to make everything the same, though, right? See, I can't say now. Homogenize means to make it the same, right? I think that's right. Kevin Chapman wants to know when Bananas football will happen. I don't know. One of the things I do believe, though, along those lines, you remember when the XFL first came out? I think the XFL should have been a scripted version of football, sort of like roller derby is or was, maybe still is. I think there should have been good guy teams and bad guy teams. I think there should have been predetermined outcomes and storylines. I think you could do that with football, and I think that would be fun. So I don't know if we get banana ball football, but a WWE style of football with late hit, the heel team is taking late hits and injuring quarterbacks and, playing the game the wrong way, cheating. I think that would work. I think that would work. All right, let's see what else. George on Tap says the playoff committee just announced they are recalibrating the strength of schedule this season. See, the problem is they say one thing and do another. Supposedly they have just stacks and stacks of data available to them, but it's the wrong. Anybody who kind of understands college football stats understands the data they have is the wrong data. It's the wrong information. And the people in the room, with all due respect, they don't know how to read it. They just don't. Give me 12 people from our chat, or give me, the version of this other fan bases. It's if you go to a bar, you go to the Floribama. There was a great story that came out at the Floribama this weekend about, tip to play Dixieland Delight, then somebody else tipped to stop, and then somebody else tipped more to keep it going. You go to the Floribama, one of those great places down there on the, the Gulf Coast, bunch of SEC fans, bunch of college football fans, hanging out, talking football probably. It's just a group of people that sort of know how to talk ball, for lack of a better way of saying it. You'd be surprised how little of that, maybe you wouldn't be surprised just understanding other walks of life. By the time you get into the sort of ivory tower of who could be on the college football playoff selection committee, many of these folks are so disconnected from just the regular college football conversation. They just can't do it. They can't even fake it. That's what's always amazing to me is when the committee chairman, it's Ward Manuel most recently, it's been others, when they come on TV, they can't even fake the conversation. They can't even make up a reason for the things that they chose. And it's the people who seem to like college football the least, or kind of understand it the least based on the way that many of us do, are the ones who are actually in charge of making the most important decision of all. And a lot of that's just sheer motivation. The only thing that motivates the true power in college football, college athletics too, but college football in this case because it pays for everything, the only motivating force is not who wins, but who plays. Because the TV ratings are determined by who plays the game. Who wins, that's for the plebes to care about. Who plays in the game, that's the motivating force behind everything that goes on. And that's all they really care about. Are the right teams playing? Whether or not the right team won, who cares? They literally don't. But they do care who plays because that's what the rights fees are built on. Ken Holcomb says, no, don't put fake wrestling in football. I'm not talking about turning real football into wrestling, although that seems to be happening. I'm talking about creating something that doesn't currently exist. All right, we have got to go. We have been perpetually late. All right, anything else on YouTube before we go? HB says, what convinces y'all to basically believe in Gunner? Here's the thing, and I don't mean this flippant, I mean this legitimate. The fact that Georgia believes in Gunner is enough for me for right now. It is. It is. Because, as we said before, they know. The people on the inside just know more than we do. There are certain aspects of the future that can't be predicted. We don't know, for instance, how the game's going to go this year. But the people who know Gunner Stockton the best seem to like him the most. And that means something to me, Kirby Smart included. And we'll make that around the doghouse. No, not around the doghouse. That was like an hour ago. We'll make that our R.S. Andrews cool down for today. How about that? And you can find R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price promised. It's very, very hot outside right now. So make sure you get your AC tuned back up to factory fresh specs. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do that for you. Find them online at rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. We're back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. We will look forward to talking to you then. Have a great day, everybody.